Okay, so we have a quiz tomorrow. It's going to be the last grade of the third quarter. It will cover lessons 10-1, 10-2, and 10-3. The quiz looks like the homework. So if you've done all 6 of the homeworks that I've given you over the past week and a half, this quiz should be pretty easy. Now, what's going to come in handy with the study guides is up at the top, it's got all of your vocabulary and all of your theorems. So you could use the study guides as like a quick little reference here. On the quiz tomorrow from 10-1, know all of the vocabulary. Know if I give you a picture of a circle like this, that you could name a radius, or name a diameter, or name a chord, or a secant, or a tangent. So all of the vocabulary words that are right here, be able to identify those if given a picture. Also know the theorems and how to apply them. So example 1, this would be a good explanation or a good examples to identify the vocabulary, the parts of the circle. Then on the second page of the study guide, know how to find all the common tangents. So for example here, I'm not going to give you anything with a coordinate plane where I'm going to make you count the squares to give the diameter measure or the radius measure. But you will have to tell me how many common tangents you could draw in the circles. I'm not going to make you draw them. I just want to know the count. So here is the explanation. And then here are the solutions for those. And then down here at the bottom on 4 through 6, here's some practice problems that you can do. Now, also be able to apply example 4. I'm not going to give you all 3 sides of the right triangle, and then you have to verify if it's a tangent. I'm going to have one of those numbers missing. And I'm going to show you examples of this that we did in the homework. So here's the answers to the study guide. And now I've inserted practice B just to show you some examples. So here you actually had to draw the circles and put in the common tangents. You won't have to draw it. I'm going to give you the circles already drawn, but it will not have the tangents. You would have to determine how many you could add to it. Now, you are going to have questions like 12 through 14, where I'm going to ask you to find the missing value of x. We are not using a calculators for this quiz, but know that there's only one question where it's going to tell you to leave it in simplest radical form. All of the other questions are going to be perfect squares. Okay, so they're going to come out of the radical. Now, when it's not on the question where it's not a perfect square, some of them won't need to be simplified, and you'll just leave the number under the radical. But notice on these questions right here, we're applying Pythagorean theorem. So, for example, if this were question number 12 on the quiz tomorrow, what we would do here is we're going to do x squared plus 96 squared equals 100 squared. So x squared, now 96 times 96. So you're going to have to be very careful with your calculations. Some of the numbers are rather large. And then 100 squared, just add 4 zeros. So 10,000. Then I'm going to subtract the 9,216. And then I get x squared is equal to 784. Now, this is a perfect square, but if you're not sure, what you'll have to do is guesstimate. So like if you knew that 30 squared is 900, you know that's too big, so you got to go lower. So then possibly try 25 or 20. If you did 20 squared, you know that's 400. So it's going to be somewhere in between 30 and 20, and then go from there. So this number actually, the square root of 784 is 28. So you'll have a question like this where you apply the Pythagorean theorem. If it's a perfect square, the instructions don't say simplest radical form. There is one question where it tells you simplest radical form, so that should be a clue that you're going to have a radical in your answer. It may need to be simplified and it may not. Okay, the other one that we did in this homework was like 15 through 17. Yes. So for example number 15, again, we're still doing Pythagorean theorem. We have our two legs here. We have x and 32. And then I have my hypotenuse, which is made up of x plus 16. So I'm going to apply the Pythagorean theorem, or plug it into it. X squared, 32 squared, equals x plus 16 squared. This is where we're going to have to FOIL. Okay, you will not have to factor anything on this quiz because the x squareds are going to cancel. But just know that maybe for the test we will. But we'll go ahead and square the 32. And 32 times 32 is 1,024. I have to FOIL my hypotenuse. So x plus 16 squared is really just saying the same thing as x plus 16 times x plus 16. So here's where I FOIL. First, outer, inner, last. So x times x is x squared. Outer gives me 16x. Inner gives me 16x. And last, 16 times 16 gives me 256. I'm going to add the two 16s in the middle, and that gives me 32x. Rewrite the x squared and the 256. So now I'm going to set that equal to x squared plus 32x plus 256. I now need to start grouping my like terms. So I'm going to minus the x squareds, and I'm left with 1,024 is equal to 32x plus 256. Subtract the 256. And that gives me 768. Now divide by 32. And that gives me 24. And that's my answer. So you will have a question like that where you have to apply the Pythagorean theorem, but we're also going to have to FOIL one of the sides. You will also have questions like 18 through 20, where we know that those two tangent lines are congruent. So you will set them equal to each other and then solve for x. So again, most of the quiz is looking like the homework set you did. And we had 6 of them. Okay, so that's 10-1. Then from 10-2, this is where we saw how to find the arc measures. So again, up at the top of your study guide, you have all of the vocabulary that's going to be important to you. Know what a minor arc is, a major arc, and a semicircle arc. You will have to identify what type of arc it is after you calculate the number. So, for example, if I wanted to find a given arc measure, let's look at the exercises for example 1. If I wanted to find the arc measure of AD, this one's pretty basic, and you're just going to look at the central angle measure. So the measure of AD would be 70 degrees. Okay, you will also have to classify it as either a major arc, a minor arc, or a semicircle. So be careful on these questions, because these questions are going to be worth two questions here. So here, when it's 70 degrees, is that major, minor, or semicircle? It's going to be minor, right? Because it's less than 180. So not only will you have to find the measure of it, but also classify. All right. Sometimes you're going to have to find a missing arc measure first before you can answer a question. So for example, I need to find this angle in order to possibly answer the arc measure of ABC. So here I could realize that I have a diameter here, and I know that these three arc measures should add up to be 180. So if I know two of them are 70 and 170, one's 50, add them and subtract from 180. And I find out that this missing arc measure and the central angle is 60. So let's say I wanted to find arc measure ABC. I would add 60 plus 50 and get 110. So again, treat it like a puzzle, fill in the missing pieces. You'll be adding and subtracting to do that. Yes? Question, or were you stretching? Okay. All right, so be able to find missing arc measures and classify them. There are several of these questions. So that was the first page of the study guide of 10-2. There's a total of 15. All right, you will also hear some more examples of finding the arc measure. I'm not going to ask you to tell me if the circles are congruent or not, or if the arc measures are congruent. I know we did it in the homework. More focus from this lesson is finding the arc measure and classifying it. So here are the answers to the study guide, and here is the practice B that we did for homework. So again, here, 1 through 8, that would be a perfect example of classifying, either naming it as a major arc, minor arc, or semicircle. And then 9 through 18, this is where we're actually getting the measure. So all questions like that. These are all good examples on this first page. That was page of 10-2B. You will not have any questions like where you're going to find if the arc measures are congruent. So nothing like this, and nothing like that word problem there with the fan. Then from 10-3, again, you have the vocabulary and the theorems up here at the top. Be able to apply the theorems and know, when the chords are congruent, then the corresponding arc measures are going to be congruent. So be able to apply those different theorems. Most of the examples in the study guide aren't going to apply to the questions on the quiz. So at least for the study guide, you can use the vocabulary and the theorems. I would focus on the questions in the homework that you did to practice questions for 10-3. So be able to find the measure of a chord, given information like that. Be able to find the value of x. Most of the questions are going to be expressions, like this section here. Just realizing that when you have that perpendicular bisector, the two segments down here are congruent. So you'd set them equal to each other and solve for x. So questions like that from 10-3. You'll also, I think majority of the questions are going to be from the front page. Just the first page of 10-3 of the homework. Yes?
Will we ever have ones like where we won't be able to find what x is? Because instead we can have a right angle and...
No. So you won't have any questions where they're going to ask you, is it a diameter? Everything will have enough information provided that you can find x. So every question does have a solution. No yes or no answers. Like there were parts in the homework where we had to determine if it was a tangent. And that's when we had to use the Pythagorean theorem to see if it was a right triangle. I was going to give you questions like that, but then I'd have people guessing and putting yes or no. So I decided to just make sure all of the questions did have solutions. So every question can be solved. Again, you need to be speedy tomorrow. There's 15 questions. I'd say 13 of them are calculations. Some of them are obvious, okay? You just look at the angle measure. Some of the calculations you can do in your head. Others, they're going to be big. They're going to be big numbers in that Pythagorean theorem. You might have to multiply 20 times 20 or 25 times 25. Yes? No. No calculators. So you're going to be fast. There is no extended time. So when you guys get in here from lunch, be ready to work as soon as you walk in. I will be here today after school if you have last minute questions, or I will also be here in the morning. Again, if you've done all 6 homeworks with no problems, I think this quiz is going to be very easy. Any questions? I have questions on the back. Let's see, because the back page was the proof.